Title: CECOT, the prison that broke the world's most dangerous men. The story started. The cameras trembled slightly as the armored bus rolled through the final checkpoint. Ahead, through the haze of the Salvadoran dawn, the vast concrete fortress of CECOT emerged, a facility unlike anything on Earth. Electric fences glowed in eerie blue coiled razor wire catching the morning mist like strands of light. This was no ordinary prison. It was the end of the road for the men the world had called unbreakable. In the silence inside the bus, hundreds of inmates sat chained together, heads bowed, their tattoos half hidden beneath white uniforms. For years they had ruled neighborhoods, controlled lives, and decided fates with a single nod. Now, their eyes avoided the windows. The moment the gates closed behind them, the world outside would cease to exist. CECOT, the Terrorism Confinement Center, was designed for one purpose: to erase the illusion of power. Built in 2022 under President Nayib Bukel's administration, it stretched across 410 acres of isolated land. Surrounded by 9-meter walls and a 15,000-volt electric fence, it could hold 40,000 inmates. Each section had double walls, 20-foot gaps filled with gravel that crunched loudly under every step. There was no room for escape, no whisper of freedom. When construction began, many around the world called it impossible. How could a nation of just 6 million people need the largest prison on the planet? But El Salvador had lived through decades of fear. For years, gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18 had turned city streets into battlegrounds. By 2022, the government had declared a state of emergency. More than 70,000 suspected gang members, about 2% of the adult population, were arrested in just 16 months. Those buses, convoys moving through the night, became the symbol of... The steel doors groaned open, revealing the heart of CECOT. The air inside was heavy, humming with fluorescent lights that never turned off. Everything was blue: walls, uniforms, shadows, even the reflections on the concrete floors. It felt less like a prison and more like a machine, one built to erase human identity piece by piece. Guards led us down a narrow hall lined with reinforced glass. On the other side, hundreds of inmates stood shoulder to shoulder, heads shaved, hands clasped behind their backs. Their tattoos, once symbols of fear, looked like faded maps of a life that no longer existed. No one spoke. No one dared to. The silence was so deep that even the sound of boots on the floor seemed too loud. One officer leaned closer to the glass and whispered, "They used to laugh at us. Now they don't even look up." We reached a section known as Module 3, built to contain some of the most violent leaders from across the country. Here, no sunlight touched the floor. Artificial lights mimicked day and night, but time lost meaning quickly. Each inmate got just 2 meals a day, simple trays of beans, rice, and bread. No utensils, no mirrors, no metal of any kind. Every action was watched by cameras and thermal sensors from a control tower that never slept. A technician explained how the surveillance system worked. "We monitor every breath, every movement. If someone even stands up without permission, an alert is triggered." His tone wasn't proud, it was tired. As he spoke, his face reflected in the glass, looked pale under the cold light. Inside, the prisoners moved in rhythm. Line up, sit down, eat, stand up, repeat. To them, CECOT wasn't just a building. It was a rhythm that crushed thought, stripped will, and replaced both with silence. Many had entered shouting and cursing. Weeks later, they barely whispered. We followed the guards into a smaller cell block, where The morning after our second day inside CECOT, the sun rose pale and cold over the compound. From the outside, the facility looked calm, silent concrete stretching into the fog, but inside, that silence felt heavier, almost alive. The blue floodlights that ringed the walls never turned off, giving the place an endless twilight. No birds, no echoes, just the faint hum of generators and the clank of steel gates closing one after another. We were escorted to the observation level, a catwalk that overlooked 4 massive housing blocks. From up there, the view was both stunning and haunting. Thousands of white-clad men kneeling in perfect lines, motionless, heads down. They didn't move unless commanded. To the guards, it was discipline. To me, it felt like watching humanity being erased in real time. The officer guiding us, a tall man with calm eyes named Lieutenant Reyes, explained that CECOT was designed to break the structure that gangs had relied on for decades. Before, they ran everything from inside prisons, he said. Phones, orders, even murders. This place ended that. They have no contact, no voice, no power. He paused, his eyes drifting across the rows of men below. But when you take everything away, what's left? We moved to the control center, a circular room filled with glowing monitors. Each screen displayed a different angle. Corridors, cells, meal lines, isolation blocks. The footage looped endlessly, a ballet of control and obedience. A technician zoomed in on one of the feeds. A man sat alone on his bed, motionless for hours. He's been like that for 3 days, the technician said quietly. No words, no movement. We check his vitals. He's fine. He just stopped talking. It was strange how the silence had become the loudest part of CECOT. Every step we took echoed through the halls like footsteps in a cavern. Every door slammed shut with finality, as I, to remind everyone inside that the outside world was gone for good. At noon, we were allowed into the medical wing, where inmates received routine checks. Rows of narrow beds lined the room. The men stared straight ahead as nurses checked their pulse and temperature. There was no conversation. A young medic told us that most of them suffered from insomnia and disorientation. They don't dream anymore, she said. They say the lights never let them. Her words hit hard. Even sleep, the one freedom left to a prisoner, was now controlled by fluorescent light. When we returned to the main corridor, a sudden alarm shattered the calm. Red lights flashed down the hallway. Guards rushed past us, shouting codes into their radios. Reyes motioned for us to stay put. Through a narrow window, I saw movement inside one of the cell blocks. An inmate had collapsed. Minutes later, the medics wheeled him out, eyes open but unblinking. The guard spoke in clipped Spanish, saying he'd stopped responding during inspection. He was alive, but not present. His body there, his mind somewhere else. It wasn't rebellion, it was surrender. After the alarm faded, Reyes led us outside to the yard, the only open space inside the complex. It wasn't really a yard, more like a walled square of concrete surrounded by towers. The air smelled faintly metallic, and the sky above was a thin strip between the walls. Sometimes we bring small groups here, he said. Let them feel the air. Remind them there's still a world out there. One prisoner stood near the far wall, head tilted upward toward that narrow slice of sky. He didn't blink. For a moment, he seemed almost peaceful. Then a guard tapped his shoulder, and he returned to the line. I asked Reyes if he ever got used to it. The silence, the repetition, the sense of total control. He didn't answer right away. I tell myself this is justice, he feintably said, that this is what the country needed. But some nights, when I go home and close my eyes, I still hear the quiet. It follows you. That night, we stayed in a small building near the facility reserved for visitors. I couldn't sleep. The hum of distant lights seeped through the walls. Even outside the main complex, the atmosphere felt the same. Cold, controlled, almost watchful. Around 2 a.m., I stepped outside. The fog hung low over the fence line, glowing faint blue from the perimeter lights. Somewhere in that vast compound, 40,000 men were awake in silence. The next morning, we met with a senior administrator who oversaw daily operations. He spoke with precision, showing us statistics, crime rates dropping, neighborhoods safer, families finally walking the streets without fear. CECOT changed everything, he said proudly. For the first time in 30 years, we control our country again. And yet, behind his pride, there was something else. An unease he didn't quite hide. When I asked if he ever thought about what this level of control did to the human spirit, he hesitated. "It's necessary," he said quietly. But necessary doesn't always mean easy. Later, as we prepared to leave, our convoy stopped by the main gate. From there, I looked back one last time at the massive structure. The fog was lifting, revealing the endless gray walls and guard towers glowing faint blue. The silence pressed out from the inside, as if the prison itself were exhaling. For a moment, I thought about the thousands of lives inside, men who once ruled streets and cities, now reduced to stillness. Maybe some of them deserved it, maybe some didn't. But what struck me most wasn't fear or justice. It was the realization that CECOT had become something larger than punishment. It was a mirror, one that showed how far a nation would go to find peace, and what it might lose in the process. On the flight home, the view of El Salvador shrank beneath the clouds. The country looked calm, peaceful even. But in the back of me, a mind, the image of those blue-lit corridors stayed, unblinking, eternal. Weeks later, when I watched the footage back in the editing room, something caught my attention. In one of the surveillance clips, far in the corner of the cell block, a man lifted his head for just a second and looked directly into the camera. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. And in that brief moment, through all the control, silence, and concrete, it felt like the prison itself was watching back.